The tropics. Endless white sandy beaches with some palm trees in the distance while you are sipping on that sweet, sweet coconut water. Or one of the famous, massive, destructive tropical storms is forming off in the distance. The thing is, at the most tropical place of them all, the equator, there are no cyclones, or typhoons, or hurricanes, or whatever you want to call them. These storms will only ever form 15 degrees outside of the equator. This video will explain exactly why that is. First, let us tackle some of the nomenclature of these storms. A tropical storm can have different names depending on where it forms, and, more importantly, who it's going to impact. Hurricane, if it's near North America, this can be either the Pacific or the Atlantic side. Typhoon, if it's near Southeast or East Asia. And cyclone, if it's in the South Pacific or Indian Ocean. Generally, these would be south of the equator, which means that they would have a different rotation than the Northern Hemisphere hurricanes or typhoons. I'll be using tropical cyclone for the rest of this video, as technically this is their scientific name for these storms. These storms almost always form in the tropical region between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, as they need fairly warm water to get them started. However, once formed, they can leave the tropics and end up in rather untropical places. The storms form when the relatively warm water of the tropic evaporates. Then, as the air rises, it begins to cool, and eventually will condense into rain clouds and create lightning storms. As the water is evaporating upwards, this leaves an area of low pressure at the ocean surface. This draws in air from the surrounding areas, which in turn causes more water to evaporate, and becomes a self-feeding, circulating operation. Over time, this becomes an area with columns of storm clouds which begin to rotate. In the center, a low pressure area is formed. Due to this extremely low pressure, any cloud in this area will sink down, and as such, leave an open area known as the eye of the storm. Why do tropical cyclones not form at the equator? Namely, they need to be rotating to get going and become self-feeding. The rotation is caused by the Coriolis effect, which is minimal at the equator. The Coriolis effect is caused by the Earth's rotation around its axis. If you stood at the poles, you will be rotating like you're twirling or pivoting, but further out it is like you're actually moving around something. Subsequently, at the equator, the Earth is moving a lot faster than compared to something closer to the poles. The cloud closest to the equator are moving faster, which causes the rotation. This is why they have different rotational directions north or south of the equator. As a result, tropical cyclones cannot form on the equator as the Coriolis effect won't happen and nothing will push the cyclone to become cyclonic. Tropical cyclones have been bringing destruction all over the world for ages and ages, and naturally we humans have tried to stop them forming. So what are the reasons that would stop a tropical cyclone from forming? If the water temperature is below 27 degrees Celsius? If the local winds are too strong, this stops the water evaporating into clouds all in the same area. If the water stops evaporating, or if the humidity in the air is too low. This really doesn't leave a lot to work with in stopping a tropical cyclone from forming, as they are basically air and water condensing and evaporating. But this hasn't stopped people from trying. The United States government from 1962 to 1983 had the aptly named Project Stormfury. The US thought that if they could cause the supercool water in the hurricane to freeze, then it would stop the hurricane. Supercool water is water that is below freezing temperature, without actually freezing. The issue was, which we now know, is that the hurricanes have little supercool water inside of them. Nevertheless, the plan was to fly directly into the hurricane and shoot silver oxide into it. The hypothesis was that this would cause the eyeball to collapse into a larger eye, thus decreasing the strength of the hurricane. The US seeded in total 7 hurricanes over the history of Project Stormfury, with varying results. However, with modern knowledge of hurricanes, this method does not work, and the project was not successful at stopping hurricanes. It was deemed too expensive and just easier to build hurricane-proof infrastructure on the land. And then there is the final odd piece about tropical cyclones, and that is where and how do they get their names? Naming the storms after people seems to have begun by an Australian weather forecaster. He would name them after politicians he didn't like, so he could say something like, "Mr. Dribbles is causing havoc in the South Pacific." As time ticked on, and he retired, the naming of cyclones after people happened infrequently, but was finally formalised in 1964 in Australia. And other countries and regions started to do the same. At first only women's names were used. However, in 1975 for International Women's Year, the list of names was changed so it had both male and female names, so a tick for equality there. Today, generally, each country or region has a list of names each beginning with a different letter. They will work alphabetically through the list as a cyclone, typhoon, or hurricane forms. If the storm causes significant damage for it to be rememberable, the name will be retired and then a new name will be added to the list in its place. You are invited to submit name requests to the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. However, because of the rarity of a cyclone, it may take up to 50 years for the names to be added to the list. So, good luck seeing a suggestion come up. Thanks for watching. If you learned something new and interesting about tropical cyclones, then hit that like button below and subscribe for more content like this. I will see you later in another video.